Let me set a scene for you real quick. It's 2015 and I'm just watching some YouTube videos one day. Then, at some point, I saw a video talking about a spiritual successor to Castlevania. This was around the turbulent times with Konami and Kojima. The last Castlevania game I had played was the reboot they made. Well, that or Harmony of Despair? Dissonance? It was the multiplayer one. Either way, it had been a long time to say the least. Realistically, the last proper Castlevania game I played was Order of Ecclesia way back in 2007. What a fantastic game that was. Anyway, to hear about a true spiritual successor to that style of Castlevania was some of the best news I could have gotten on a random day like that. It was going to be headed by Koji Igarashi, one of the original developers for Symphony of the Night, and man, what an announcement trailer that was. It was filled to the brim with the kind of cheese that can only be provided by someone with passion. As a player of these games, I can only get excited to see this guy, of whom I will probably never meet, and while I would love to one day, if given even half the chance, I probably won't, but to see him walk around with all the confidence that's required to transform into CG bats and tossing wine glasses around, how could I not immediately want to be a part of this game in some way? Well, as luck would have it, the announcement was not only for the game, but a Kickstarter for the game. So, if you look real carefully at the end credits of Ritual of the Night, my name is nowhere on that list. Yeah, that's right. I wanted to be able to back the game because I really wanted this type of thing to exist. Metroid was super dead at the time, and while some indie games carried the torch, and to that I thank them for it, it really isn't quite the same. Plus, I wanted to see what a new Castlevania game would look like in this modern age. All that aside, the only large problem I saw with this is the fact that it was a Kickstarter, which, no shame to those that back things on the platform, some really cool and interesting ideas can be found there. But video games have a, let's say, less than stellar track record when it comes to Kickstarter. We all remember Mighty No. 9 and all the would-be plans for that series. Many people, I think, were just a touch hesitant, but it got funded, and it got funded pretty quickly. It smashed through all the goals and even all the stretch goals they laid out for it. Why deep dive into this? I thought it was a video about Curse of the Moon, not Ritual of the Night. Well, dear viewer, one of those extreme stretch goals was to fund a sort of prequel. That game became Bloodstained Curse of the Moon. Hello and welcome everyone. My name is Leon and I want to invite you to a new chapter in the ever-expanding legacy that is the Castlevania Retrospective EX Bloodstained Edition.
Bloodstained.
The game was developed in a relatively short time span, roughly 6 months, which is insanely fast. The team that developed it was Inti Creates, who are a bunch of seasoned devs that left Capcom to kinda go do their own thing. They are mostly known for, at the time anyway, Mega Man 9 and 10, Blaster Master Zero, and a whole bunch more. Funnily enough, they also helped develop Mighty No. 9, so when people found out they were going to handle Curse of the Moon, some weren't exactly keen on that idea. Don't let that dissuade you, however. The team that took on the project were firing on all cylinders for this one. Being led by Igarashi as the writer and one of the producers for the project, it was in the right hands. With game director Hiroki Maezawa, Michiru Yamane, one of the legendary composers for Castlevania, with designs by Hiroki Yunoki and a whole bunch of others who cut their teeth on 2D platformers, it had risk, of course, but as luck would have it, they were just the right people for the job. Production didn't happen right away, as Inti Creates actually made an alpha version of Ritual of the Night that was shown off at the 2016 E3 show. Once that was done, development of Ritual of the Night transferred from Inti Creates to Artplay, and the team at Inti Creates really got to it in 2017. Roughly 6 months later, releasing worldwide between the 24th of May 2018 and the 6th of June that year, Bloodstained Curse of the Moon was released on just about every platform it could be. 3DS, Switch, PS4, PC, Xbox One, there was even a PS Vita release. That's wild. Reception from everybody was mostly positive. Fans enjoyed the 8-bit inspired game, and most of the critical outlets at the time were all roughly on the same page. Everyone thought it was pretty good. Average scores ranging somewhere in the B+ range, with some outliers here and there. During production, though, the game became less of a prequel, which was supposed to take place about 10 years before Ritual of the Night, and it somehow became more of a spin-off or alternate reality. All told, its development was actually fairly smooth throughout. Aha, gameplay. There's a decent amount to cover here, so get ready. In terms of controls, you can move left and right, you can jump and you can attack, either with a main weapon or a sub-weapon. The movement is fairly heavy feeling. The characters move just like any old-school Belmont would, minus maybe the powerful Belmont strut. Your jumps are locked. Once you get airborne, that's it. You can't really adjust once you make that initial leap. You can attack mid-air, however. On the ground, you have 2 attack heights, chest high and shin high. This is where the base info stops, and we move into talking about the other characters. That's correct, other characters. While Zangetsu is the main character of the game, you can and will encounter a few others in the early levels. Miriam, Alfred, and Jeeble. These people make up the rest of your party. You can switch on the fly, and it only takes a bit of time to do so. Each character has some kind of special attribute to them that makes them suited for certain situations. That said, they all have the same walk speed. Unlike Castlevania 3, where you can only have one other partner, here you have access to all 4 at all times. Zangetsu is middle of the road and can be used in most situations. His main weapon is a katana, and he has the best base health overall. He attacks the fastest out of everyone and has some great sub-weapons. Diagonal chain whip, some kind of talisman bomb, and this demon essence power-up, which increases all damage for all characters when you switch to them, for a short time. Miriam is the second character you encounter, and she uses a whip to attack, which essentially makes her a Belmont stand-in. Her base health is second best, and she has an average to slow attack speed. But the extended distance with the whip makes up for that. Her sub-weapons include a throwing dagger, 3 throwing daggers, but diagonal, and the scythe. Oh, and this huge axe, which does crazy damage, but has a forever long windup. She also has the ability to slide under things and can do a high jump. Alfred is the third character you get, and he is the Sypha stand-in, or if you'd rather, the mage of the group, with the lowest overall health and slowest attack by far. The one good thing about his attack is it lingers on the screen for a good long time, but the range is terrible. As, well, he attacks with a staff. That said, you aren't really using Alfred to attack physically. You're using him for the magic, of which there are some pretty good spells. His default spell is a fire barrier that can be swapped over to any character when you make that switch. The ice spell can travel the entirety of the screen and freezes any enemy on contact. You can then attack them to instantly shatter them, or you can try to synergize with Miriam's axe to deal double base damage and shred bosses. Alfred has a special lightning spell, which lets you summon up to 3 ball lightnings, which will then roam the screen and chase down foes. It deals pretty good damage on hit multiple times. Then there's the clone spell, which is it's just awful. It clones only Alfred and sends that clone out a small distance. It can be alright, but man, that is a hyper-specific use case. Lastly, we have Jeeble. This is the a la carte stand-in. With the third best health pool and a short-range bat shotgun-like attack, he attacks at about the same pace as Miriam does, but the bats do crazy damage up close. Jeeble has no sub-weapons, but that means that any and all candles that would house them for others always drop a large weapon energy bottle. More on that in a bit. Jeeble does have the ability to transform into a bat and fly around, which is great for getting into some hard to reach spots, and can come in pretty clutch if you get bounced back into a pit. Alright, with character breakdowns out of the way, let's get on to level traversal. Each level has multiple paths you could take to get to the end. If you have the right person for the right path, you can blaze a trail through the levels pretty quick. If you notice though, I said if. At any point, you could lose a party member if they lose all their health or fall into a pit. Once they're gone, they're out for the rest of that level, or until you lose everyone and then start at the closest checkpoint. That said, every character does have their own health pools, so you don't have to worry about sharing the pain. Health and weapon energy can be found in candles or in the walls. This is an old school Castlevania-like after all. One great update is that sub-weapon candles have different colors. So, if you wanted to swap characters and see what a candle has for them, you can do that without having to worry about losing your current equipped sub-weapon. If you ever want to know if you're on the right path, just look for those pointing skeletons. If you can take the path they recommend, then you are going the right way. Sometimes, this is a pretty easy path. Sometimes it's frogs. I mean the hard path. But it's always the fastest. Each level is capped with a boss to fight. These scale with each level, and some of them can get to be fairly tough. At the end of each fight, the boss will use a desperation attack. For the most part, this attack is all show, as it can't really kill you. But if you dodge it, you will gain an extra life. Just be careful with this boss. The desperation attack won't kill you, but the wind will. When you beat the final boss, buckle up because you didn't beat the game. You only got about 1/3 of it done. In a sort of new game plus mode, the option of Nightmare mode becomes available, and it asks you to play the game again, but harder and with some interesting gameplay changes. I won't get into it here because it's story related, but stick around for it in the story breakdown. Likewise, should you make some choices in your playthrough, you might unlock Ultimate mode, which gives Zangetsu some new moves. That again covers some spoiler type territory, so if you want to learn about it, hang tight for that. One last thing. At any point, you can utilize the Curse of the Moon in the options. It will let you go back to any level you beat, but to advance again, you'll have to re-beat that level. It's like a one-way time machine, and it only sends you backwards, so use it at your own risk. Hey, have you been enjoying the video so far? If so, as a favor to me, maybe do the stuff YouTube likes, huh? Likes, comments, maybe sub if you haven't yet. It would mean a lot as I continue to get this channel to grow. For those of you that have already done that, hey, thank you, really. Alright, let's get back to it. It's clear as day that this game calls back to the NES Castlevania, specifically Castlevania 3, Dracula's Curse. You have the whole main party from that game. Miriam is Trevor, Alfred is Sypha, and Jeeble is Alucard. The only outlier is Zangetsu, which is honestly pretty great. They all fill a type of gameplay role. More interestingly, however, is all the stuff that Curse of the Moon is when compared to its older cousin. I don't think much of anybody could realistically look at this game and think, ah yes, 8 bits as good as the NES. This game does borrow aesthetically from that era, with the controls, the colors, the sound, even the overall feel, but it's not accurate. Not really. It has the illusion of what we remember all those old games looking like as children. It's almost like they are, as the devs,
gaslighting us in a way. Granted, it's not nefarious, but take a look at this game and then look at the game it's pulling from. These are not the same. It might look like it, but Curse of the Moon is doing things that the NES Castlevania could only dream of. Parallax scrolling, multiple sprites on screen with no flicker. The music is a higher quality and is using more sound channels than what the NES could. It's so close, so damn close to what I remember these games being like. But that's all just baked into the nostalgia that this game provides. Is that a bad thing? No, several other games have harnessed the power of the retro and done it quite well. Look at the other poster child of Kickstarter games, Shovel Knight. That game also pulls deep from the nostalgia and what we think we remember these games looking like. It's almost like a revolution of that style. If games had never evolved into what they are today, perhaps something like this is what we would have been accustomed to playing. I get a kick out of this personally. I feel the same way when I saw Octopath Traveler for the first time. That HD 2D, I can look back at older 8 and 16-bit era games, and to me they all look just as good now as they did then. Something about the sprite work just has near limitless appeal. Real quick, let's talk about game feel for a bit here. No doubt this game can be brutal at times, but it's also pretty fair in that brutality. The game allows you to get extra lives with points and even with 1-up pickups scattered throughout the game, just like older NES games would. Except this is far more lenient. When you start out on a new file, the game asks you what kind of experience you want. Veteran, which plays most like the older Castlevanias. This gives you lives and knockback when hit, or Casual, which gives you unlimited lives and no knockback when hit. Just to be clear, either choice is perfectly fine. If you want that super hard retro experience, then select that style. But if you want to just play the game and not worry so much about the pits and the continues, then Casual is the way to go. Personally, I recommend the veteran style just for that authentic feel, but I understand it's not quite for everyone. The game does a pretty good job at giving you all the attempts you need at key moments. With the final boss fights, you can find 1-ups ready for you when you lose that fight, giving you as many attempts as you need to clear it. They also give you a good amount of pickups for your characters, giving you the best options for those fights. Really, it helps to alleviate some of the frustration you might feel after getting there. That said, if you know the way around these types of games, you won't have too much trouble. Alrighty then, it's story time, people. If you have yet to play this game, go ahead and use this time code here on screen to skip to the last bits. Or, if you prefer, use the description to do it, whichever floats your goat. Right, so the story here is fairly simple, as this was supposed to be like an old NES title. As the opening text crawl states, Zangetsu was given the moon's curse by demons. Ever since that happened, he has set out to slay as many as possible. One night, he felt the presence of a very powerful demon and decided to attack head-on. Along the way, at the end of the first 3 levels, you encounter people. Miriam, a shardbinder, Alfred, an alchemist, and Jeeble, another shardbinder, but one who has been forever changed by the process. Over the course of the game, you don't really get much of an additional story. It's just level boss until you get to the last level. That said, each new level has a title card, and that card does change depending on the active character, so that's a nice little touch. The overall game goes about as you would expect. At the end, they all face off against Gremory, the demon who uses the moon's power. Using every member of the team, you fight off the demon and then face her second form. Once you deal enough damage, Zangetsu takes a stance and charges up a powerful slash. With one fell swoop, he slices Gremory in half. As the castle begins to crumble away, a large orb of dark, powerful energy threatens to take everyone out, but Zangetsu jumps in front of it and takes the blast to let the others escape. The end text scrolls, and they all lament not being able to save Zangetsu on a cliff, staring at the castle. Roll credits. Now, like I said earlier, this is only 1/3 of the story. Well, maybe more like 1/2 of it. For the second half, you're gonna want to start Nightmare mode. In this mode, you'll play through the whole game again, only this time you start off as Miriam and the rest of the group. Your goal is to try and save Zangetsu, or at least save his soul. Not too much is different on this playthrough though. The game is a bit more difficult, and some new traversal options in the first 3 levels are open now that you have Miriam and Jeeble. After that though, the game plays mostly the same. Many of the extra areas you can get into in the early game have some endgame enemies to deal with, so, be ready for that. It is worth it, however, as you can get some additional power-ups. Once you get to that final level, you'll notice it's not called Curse of the Moon. Instead, it's called Fallen Moon's Requiem. This bit is super cool, as it plays out as a direct homage to the Castlevania Dracula fight, with the exception that instead of ascending to the top, you're going down, perhaps into hell itself. And given the area here, that's not too far off. This segment is broken down so that each character has their own area to navigate, which I think is awesome. Each one of these tests your skill with that character in a way that is somewhat unique to them. The final area sees you enter the chamber of the new Emperor of Darkness. And right away, this becomes a one-on-one fight, as Zangetsu takes out both Alfred and Jeeble with a paralysis move. It's just Miriam and Zangetsu now. This fight is leagues more difficult than Gremory. While she had some attacks, and they were all telegraphed pretty well, once you learned how they worked, you could fight around them, as they all had some long wind-up times. Zangetsu, though, he dashes around the screen, and you have to be aware of a few things while fighting him. Keep tabs on his movements, watch out for your allies, as they will eventually break out of the binds every once in a while, and that's your time to attack. For Alfred, you'll have to get behind him as he brings up a flame shield and walks towards Zangetsu. Jeeble will transform into a platform of bats, and you'll have to jump and attack and dodge on the landing. Eventually, after a long enough fight, you'll put Zangetsu into a desperation attack. This one, unlike all the others in the game, will kill you if you mess it up. Zangetsu charges up a large scythe while summoning orbs to attack you. In response, Alfred charges up his own magical attack. Now you have to protect Alfred during this. If even one orb hits him, yeah, that happens. Jeeble will protect one side, mostly, and you'll have to deal with the other side, plus a little extra. Once you get through it though, Alfred launches all the ball lightning, killing Zangetsu. The party leaves the castle again, sad they couldn't save his life, but at least somewhat glad they managed to save his soul. Only, Zangetsu wakes up on the top of a skyscraper sometime in the future? That's odd. Now, that is the end of Nightmare Mode, but there are still more endings. One involves you as Zangetsu just walking past all these characters and going through the whole game solo. This can be difficult as solo Zangetsu lacks a bunch of movement options to get through the game quickly, and he won't be able to get any of the power-ups on certain levels. But if you manage to do this, when you slice Gremory and deal with the Dark Ball, the other 3 come in to save Zangetsu. This leaves him wondering about his life choices and how he can be better. I personally think this is the canon ending to the game, as it sets up for the sequel fairly well. It's not 100% though, there are some lingering questions. Even still, we are not done. I won't go over all the endings as there are still more after even this one, but this is one of the bigger ones in terms of gameplay. So, instead of ignoring or teaming up with everybody you meet, you can just... yeah, you can murder them and then take their power. These powers change how Zangetsu plays. Killing Miriam makes you a monster, but a monster with a new jumping attack. Killing Alfred grants you a double jump, which lets you correct mid-air direction. And killing Jeeble gives you a dash, which when used with the double jump, lets you get to some places you otherwise couldn't without, say, Miriam or Jeeble. You also have a Mega Man style sword charge, which deals increased damage and increases the range of the attack. Now the game plays out roughly the same until you get to the last level. It's usually called Curse of the Moon, but if you play this way, it gets retitled to Cleave the Moon. The Gremory fight plays out largely the same, but because you murdered everyone, no one is able to save Zangetsu. and with nobody left to challenge him, he becomes the true Emperor of Darkness. Bad end. If you have any want to play this, I'll leave the rest to you to find and experience. But if you do that Dark Zangetsu run, you unlock Ultimate Mode, which plays out just like normal mode, except you can also recruit the others and still keep all of Zangetsu's powers, thus making him Ultimate. It lets you have the best of both worlds. Almost makes it worth the murder. Alright, welcome back to all of you who jumped ahead, and to those that stuck it out, I hope you enjoyed it. As for the final thoughts, I'm going to keep it short and sweet. This game is fun, no doubt. It brought attention back to the hard-as-nails old-school Castlevanias and introduced a bunch of new players to that type of game. Is it going to be for everybody? Nah, and honestly that's fine. It was never really meant to be. But because it has gameplay options that let you experiment with the difficulty in some ways, it definitely opens the doors for more players to get into it. That makes it all worth it. Right, so next up in this reverse retrospective, we're going to take a trip back in time to 2007 and look at my personal favorite Castlevania game, Order of Ecclesia. I look forward to seeing you there. For now though, take it easy and be wary of the full moon. You never know what demon is lurking in the shadows.
Hey everybody, welcome to the end card. We're in the thick of it now, one set of Castlevania-inspired games taken care of, and then next up on the docket, those 3 DS games that came out in the mid to late 2000s. Those are some of my favorites, with Shinoa and her story definitely taking my top spot for sure. At any rate, I appreciate you all stopping in and hanging out with me. In the immediate future, if I plan this out correctly, we'll be taking a step back into the land of Hyrule with Zelda and those Game Boy games. So, get ready for that. In the meantime, take it easy, I'll catch you next time, and keep it clean out there.